this is Celeste and welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to show you some fun I had with a new technique to me that you make your own paper using toilet paper. So I am using Quilted Northern, though it doesn't really matter what brand you use. I have 5 sheets of toilet paper stacked together, and if your toilet paper is more than it's more than 1 ply, just make sure you pull those plies apart. They should come right apart. Let's see, there you go. Just pull that apart. And lay it all on top of each other. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your spray bottle and you are going to spray that toilet paper. You don't want to completely douse it, but you want to give it a good spray. And we got our spray here. And then we are going to take our embossing folder, lay our toilet paper in, close the folder, and then run it through your die cutting machine to emboss it. You have the option of inking up your embossing folder with any kind of ink, Distress Oxides, Distress Inks, whatever kind of ink you want. You can also ink up your embossing folder, which is most of the papers I made, I did that. So when it comes out of the embossing machine, or let's wipe this water off first. When it comes off out of your die cutting machine, it's going to look like this. So it presses down, it's thin. This paper is actually still a little bit wet, so we got to let it dry. You obviously want to let it dry completely before you use it. So as for cutting it, because you'll see you're going to need to, trim off your toilet paper tail, you can use scissors, you can use a guillotine trimmer. If you use the guillotine trimmer, you need to cut with purpose. So you don't want to slowly lower your guillotine down. You need to slam your guillotine down to get a good cut. Otherwise, the paper will fray a little bit. I also tried cutting it with my rotary trimmer. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't awesome. Again, you kind of have to get it, get your rotary trimmer down, push down, and move it quickly, because if you try to do it slow, the paper's going to tear. The way I cut all of the papers I made for my cards that I'm going to show you today, I used nesting cutting dies. So this is one of the ones I used. So any kind of nesting cutting die, you can cut it down to whatever size that you want to use. And that worked out really well. There is one slight downside to cutting it to using the cutting dies to cut the paper, is that because it is embossed paper, it will flatten the embossing a little bit, but as you'll see with the cards that I made, it didn't really flatten it that much, so I don't think it made that much of a difference. As for adhesives, you can use liquid glue or you can use a tape runner. At first I was terrified that the liquid glue would just make my paper soggy, and it didn't. It actually was fine. So some of the cards I used making a tape runner, some of the cards I used with my liquid glue, and both of them worked equally fine. So the first card I made, I have to show you, is this one here. I inked up my embossing folder. I used Distress Oxide ink, and you can see again that it did flatten out a little bit, but the design is still there and there's still some texture, so it worked really well. So I used an oval die cut, and then I matted it on white and mounted it on black cardstock. So the next card I have, this one is the only one that I made using just straight up white toilet paper. And you can see it's very pretty, but it's a little bit subdued. So that's why I chose to go with inking up my embossing folder for all of the rest of the ones that I did. So since this one was so subdued, I went ahead and made it into a sympathy card. So, all right, the next card I have, I used a 3D embossing folder. So this one I inked up with Distress Inks and just die cut the hello, matted it on the blue, and that one is pretty awesome. And this one really didn't lose very much of the dimension when I sent it through to cut the rectangle out. So it still maintained a lot of its, ooh, you can really see it there. It maintained a lot of its shape with that one. So this one here, some of you probably already saw on Facebook or Instagram. This was the first one I made. So this one I used the rounded corner rectangle cutting die, and the big thanks die from Concord at 9th. So the other thing too is this paper is it's so soft. It's smooth and it feels really nice to touch it. So that's, you know, kind of the difference between just using cardstock in your embossing folder and using this. It just looks a little different. So, all right, this one here, made it into a happy birthday card. I matched my ink and my background cardstock a little too closely, so I had to use vellum so that the happy birthday would show through. But the good news is you can't even tell. Initially, I just glued the vellum underneath the happy birthday, but then I didn't like the corners flapping, so I tried to glue it underneath the corners, and you can't even see it because the toilet paper just absorbs the glue, so there's no funny marks underneath your vellum. So that's another thing. So, and the last card I made today, I actually used my heart cutting dies, and so I heat embossed, just clear heat embossed the love stamp all across the background. Cut out the hearts with the heart cutting dies, did the love with glittery cardstock, and then the U with white heat embossing. So I had a ton of fun making my own paper and using it to make some cards. Hopefully you might be inspired to try making your own paper too. Thank you for watching and have a great day.